So we are in the fourth book in the series. This book is called One Special Moment, and it deals with Sterling Hamilton and this girl named Kobe Wingate. Now, Kobe Wingate is a new character on the scene. She was not spoken of or introduced to us in any of the previous books, but Sterling has been introduced to us in the previous books. Now, the reason why he is connected to the Madras clan, and one in particular is Jacob Madras. And Jacob Madras is Justin, Dex, and Clayton's uncle. All right. And the reason why Sterling was introduced to us is because Jacob Madras is married to this woman named Diamond Swain. Now, Diamond Swain is a very high profile, popular actress, just as well as Sterling Hamilton. He's a very high profile actor as well. And these two, according to the media, are believed to be romantically linked and even secretly married. This is what the media believes. But Jacob is the mastermind behind letting the media believe that these two are romantically linked. And the reason why he wants it to appear, this way is because he wants to have his privacy, and he wants Diamond to have her privacy as well, simply because they're not ready to share with their family and friends that they're married. I think because of the age gap and age difference between them two. And they just don't want anybody in their business, and they want to enjoy their marriage. You know how it is when you're married to a high profile actor or actresses, how that can be, how people will destroy and ruin what you have. So sometimes it is best if you keep that, away and out of the public, like your private business, keep it private. So, and which says a lot about Sterling Hamilton, because for Jacob to trust Sterling Hamilton with his wife, because they have to make it believable. So sometimes they might share a glance, or they may share an innocent kiss, and they may do something that can seem or appear believable. And these two actually have been in several movies together, and they have these love scenes and all of that. And they're both beautiful, attractive people. So it takes a lot of, you have to be very, very secure to be married to a high profile actor or actress or superstar, movie star, what have you. So yeah, that says a lot about Sterling. Now, Sterling and Kobe's relationship and how it unfolds is so funny. I shared a plethora of laughs throughout this book because these two are very, very funny, and these two have similar backgrounds, but they're I guess you can say that both of their backgrounds are pretty dramatic. I don't think one is more than the other. They're kind of like the same. So to give a background of each character, now Kobe Wingate, she's 26 years old, and she is a third grade teacher. And she is described as having this nut brown, caramel kind of like complexion. She has dark black hair, almond shaped dark eyes, high cheekbones, straight nose, full lips, and she is from Virginia. So that's a little bit about her. Now, she does have a brother, but he's like 10 years older than her. But when she was 10 years old and he was 20 years old, their parents actually died in the plane crash. So with that being said, her brother, James, his name is James, took on the role and responsibility of raising her as a parent. So she's very grateful for her brother. Now, her brother is I just applaud him. I really liked his character because he was intelligent, he was smart, and he really was selfless. He was not a selfish person. He actually had a full scholarship to Harvard University, and he kind of like turned his back on it because their parents just died. And at the time, Kobe was 10 years old, so he kind of like picked up the slack. And when he was taking on this role, he just was thinking more about her than his own selfish needs. But after a while, after I'm sure he raised her and pushed her all the way through grade school, middle school, and when she gets to high school, he actually went back to school. He took up some night classes at a community college, pressed his way, and he got his bachelor degree as a chemist, I believe. Yeah, he had a bachelor degree in chemistry, and then he continued, and then a few years later, he got his MBA. So he's doing really good for himself, and he wasn't romantically linked to anyone during this time. He was a full-time parent and a full-time student, and he really didn't have much of a love life. And Kobe, she ended up graduating, high school, and then she attended Hampton University. Hampton University is in Virginia, so she didn't go far to attend college. She attended college right there in Virginia, and then after she went on to college is when her brother James got romantically linked to this woman named Cynthia. Cynthia Johnson. Johnson is her name. They don't really talk much about Cynthia Johnson, his wife, but I do know that Cynthia Johnson is the mastermind behind how Kobe and Sterling Hamilton met. Now, Cynthia is head over heels in love with Sterling Hamilton. She's a big fan of his. She purchases all his movies. She's seen his movies more than once. She'll buy any magazine that his face is on the cover of. She just loves him. She thinks he's fine. She just has a huge crush on him, and she talks about him all the time and brag on him all the time, that it actually caused Kobe to look closely or more closely at his career and what he does, because she really didn't like him initially. She didn't keep up with him or follow him, but after hearing her sister-in-law brag on this guy a lot is why she started paying attention to him. Now, she can't deny the brother is fine, because he is fine, but she wasn't all into him like that. So Cynthia was the one that kind of gave her the notion to approach Sterling Hamilton. Now, the reason why Cynthia is encouraging Kobe to approach Sterling is because of her brother. Now, Kobe's brother James, like I said, he's a chemist, and he was working at this pharmaceutical company, which happens to be one of the largest pharmaceutical firms in the country. And not only that, he was one of their top chemists. So they relied on him to create and put together these special fragrances and perfumes and all of that. So he began to get good at his craft. He began to get even more creative, that he decided to create a fragrance for his sister Kobe, and he wanted to give her this gift as her 18th birthday present. And he developed this scent so well that his superiors inquired about it. And he ended up getting fired because, of course, he didn't divulge the ingredients that he used for this scent. So they was like, okay, we're your superiors. You're supposed to give us the ingredients if we ask you, so we're going to fire you. And they do. But he goes on, and he ended up creating or starting his own cosmetic company called Wingate Cosmetics. Basically, his sister and him, that's their last name, Wingate. So, and he worked so hard too. Well, I just love this character because he worked so hard. Like, everything he did it with a lot of time and effort and studying, and he just really devoted himself and applied himself to the point where he just always came out on top. I really liked him a whole lot. I loved his character. He used every penny that he owned to create this company. He worked long hours, and it got so bad. He was so into this work that his marriage almost was compromised just almost compromised because of all of the hours he was putting in. But now that his own company is up and running and they're doing good and profit sales are wonderful, it's doing great, he can kind of relax now because he's good financially. And besides, it's a great time for him to relax because Cynthia, his wife, is pregnant. So they're doing good right now. Now he finally can just relax and just enjoy the fruit of his labors. So Kobe, although her brother is doing well with his company, she felt like it can do better. You know, there's nothing wrong with wanting more. Now, Kobe wanted what all the other companies had, you know, that her brother's company didn't. Wingate Cosmetics was great, but they didn't have endorsements. Now, the other companies like Vanity Fair and all of these other great companies that you can think of out there, they had celebrity endorsements. So she wanted her brother to have a celebrity endorsement as well. And that's where Sterling comes in at. Because he's very popular and he will be a great face to endorse his newest creation, well, her brother's newest creation, which is this cologne for men called Awesome. And she felt like, you know, okay, well, he'd be a good candidate. So actually, it unfolds a little bit. This is where it unfolds. And I'm going to give a little background of Sterling Hamilton. Now, Sterling Hamilton is 35 years old. He's bigger than life. He's a ladies' man. He's popular. We know that he's an actor and he has all of these great accolades, and he's getting these prominent roles in these gigs and these movies. He's just bigger than life. And his life, well, coming up, he was brought up in a single parent home. But it was his father that took on the prominent role of both mother and father, simply because Sterling's mother, she married his father very young. His father's name is Chandler and his mother name is Angeline. Now, when Angeline got married to his father, she was only 17 years old, okay? Now, Chandler was a hardworking man. He was a good-looking man. He was a decent man, making a decent wage, doing the best he could to provide for him and his family or whatever. And to a 17-year-old Angeline, that wasn't enough for her. She didn't want that type of life, and she felt like she was so young and she was missing out on a lot of things, and she wanted more out of life, more than what Chandler could offer her. So she decides that after giving birth to Sterling, when he was only 6 weeks old, that she was just going to cut ties with her marriage, cut ties to her child, turn her back on both of those responsibilities of being a wife, being a mother. And she wanted to just run away and create a life without them. And she wanted to wash her hand clean of them and never think of them again, like totally act as if she never knew them. And that's what she did, which was unbelievable. It's not a trait of a mother. How could a mother, and the baby was so young, he was 6 weeks old. And here you have Chandler, his dad. He can't run away from his responsibility. He could have, but he's a man of integrity. He raises Sterling, and he does the best that he can, and he does an excellent job of raising him, teaching him the fundamentals of how to be a man, teaching him what loves look like. Even though it didn't come from his mother, he taught him what love was. He was a very loving, good father, and really was instrumental in a lot of his accomplishments, you know, because his dad really supported him, pushed him, loved him, and he was just an all-around great dad. He was blessed to have him as a father. And can you imagine what his dad was going through? Here he is, I just lost my wife. Well, I didn't lose her, not to death or anything like that, but she just walked out on me, ran away, and just left us. So he's just raising a child the best way he knows how. And it's a good thing that he figured it out rather quickly and done an excellent job. But the thing about Sterling's dad, he never forgot about Angeline. And even though Angeline wanted a better life and she wanted to run away, he still told Sterling about her. And he would have pictures of his mother, on the dressers and things like that. And of course, Sterling, being a child, you absorb everything like a sponge. He would look at his mother's picture every day, just looking at her picture. So he has this embedded in his brain, what she looks like. So it just so happened when Sterling turned 6 years old, and I believe they are located in North Carolina. Okay, that's where he's originally from. And that's where Angeline was from. But Angeline, when she went off to create a whole new life, she went to Florida. And when she went to Florida, a little while after that, she ended up meeting a very wealthy businessman, popular businessman who is doing well. He's successful. He has the money. He has the means to accommodate the lifestyle in life that she felt that she was entitled to or that she deserved. She thought money was everything, and this extravagant lifestyle was everything. And his name is Alan Chenault. His last name is hard to pronounce, but his name was Alan. And since he's so popular and everything like that, it just so happened one day they were being interviewed on the television. Now, mind you, her current husband, Alan, has no knowledge of the previous life that Angeline had back in North Carolina. He didn't know about her ex-husband. He didn't know about her child, none of that. He's just thinking, oh, this is her first marriage and this is her first child. So they were being interviewed on television one day, and she was just gushing about how excited and happy and elated that they were, especially for her, because this was her first child. She just had given birth to her first child, according to her, and he's now 1 year old. So is this makes Sterling, well, this is Sterling's half brother here. His name was Nicholas. And his name is Nicholas. It's not past tense. But his name is Nicholas. And he's 1 year old. And she's gushing about him and how proud she is of him. Now, how is it that a mother could sit there and say that this is her first child? But nonetheless, she does. And okay, so she's gushing over that. And I'm like, the disrespect and the audacity of this woman. Like, I didn't like her character at all. And so a little while after that interview, I believe that Angeline and her husband and her 1 year old son happened to be in North Carolina on some type of trip. I don't know what it was, but I know that Sterling at this time is 6 years old now. He's no longer 6 weeks. He's 6 years old. And he just so happened to be at the same place at the same time as his mother. They were actually in the hotel lobby of a hotel. And they're in this lobby, and he's with the field trip. He's on this field trip with his classmates and the students and something like that. I think it was some type of youth gathering or something of those sorts. And he's on the field trip with these guys. And immediately, he spots his mother. And he sees her over there. And of course, when a 6-year-old, mind you, this is a 6-year-old, they do what 6-year-olds do. When they recognize someone that they know, they go up to them. So he went up to his mother and he says, when are you going to come back to me and my dad and be with us again? And of course, when she looks at him, she is mortified because she has a new life and she has a new child and a new husband, and she don't want nothing to do with her previous life. So of course, when he says this to her, she totally denies it and says, what are you doing? What are you talking about? You're crazy. Get away from me and my family. And she goes so far as to summon the hotel security and tells security that this 6-year-old boy is harassing her. And of course, the little boy was so hurt. And actually, Edward Stewart, his attorney, was a chaperone on this field trip. I'm going to get to him in a minute. But Edward Stewart is a friend of the family. So Edward Stewart is Sterling's father's friend, and he was chaperoning that day. So he got to witness this happening to Sterling. And he didn't know what was going on because, I mean, Sterling's father, Chandler, didn't really divulge the details of what happened as far as with Sterling's mother. So everything got out. So when, of course, this child gets denied, he's hurt. He feels betrayed. He feels rejected. He feels neglected. He feels like a reject. He feels so many horrible things that a child would feel. So that night when he went home, he cried himself to sleep. He just cried himself to sleep. And of course, his father tried to console him the best way he knew how. But that was the onset of Sterling's bitterness. He let bitterness sit in and he became bitter, very, very bitter and very just expressionless. It was like he didn't have no emotion after that. Like, can you blame him? So that was the beginning of the end. As far as him having faith in women, him respecting women, him possibly falling in love with a woman one day, he's like, no. Because he didn't have a great relationship with his mother. So he has his hang up. Now, like I said, he's 35. Now, at this current time in his life, he feels that now is the time for him to have a child. He wants to have a child. And the reason why he feels this way is because he just recently lost his father a year ago to him having a heart attack in his sleep. He died of a heart attack. And I believe the reason why he died of a heart attack in his sleep is because he never really got over his ex-wife. He never got over her. He died still being totally in love with her. He never remarried. He never got romantically involved with anyone. He was just stuck like Chuck over this ex-wife who is a gold digger and she's no good and she's heartless. But I believe that's why he died of a heart attack. Kind of like a broken heart. So it's been a year now since his father is gone, and that was really tough for him because that's all he had. He don't have any siblings, not to his knowledge. But he feel like it's time for him to be a parent. So he actually, of course, he did this. He was anonymous, but he put an ad in the paper to scout out women to have his baby. And the stipulations were that whoever it was that was going to carry his baby, they were going to get $1 million. And then after the baby was delivered, extra $500,000 after everything is done, said and done. But in order for this to happen, he needed to scout out someone who was going to be a great candidate, someone that he could trust, and all of that. Of course, nobody knows who this person is that put in this ad looking for a baby mother, but 100 women actually responded to this ad. But as he was going through the ad and he was trying to select someone, somehow, some way, Kobe Wingate is one of the women that he was interested in. He selects her. I find this to be funny because when Colby Wingate contacted Sterling's lawyer, Edward Stewart, she contacted him in search of a business deal. She wanted to have Sterling endorse her brother's newest cologne called Awesome. Okay, so she contacted them in search of that. She wanted a business deal. She wanted to see if she can get an endorsement deal with Sterling. So when she contacts Sterling's attorney, Edward Stewart, she received a call back maybe 3 weeks later asking her to come to California. And she does. She goes to California. So she's there in California. She touches down and she goes to the office and she meets with Mr. Stewart, and she's just in the lobby or the office waiting area of the lawyer's office and just looking around and looking at how nice everything is. And she's getting nervous because she's just trying to prepare herself for this deal, and she's hoping that she nails it and that he buys it and everything can go well so she can give James, her brother, the good news. Now, she actually did inform her brother James, because they're so close, that she was going to go to California, but she didn't tell him the truth as to why she was in California. So she just told her brother James that she was just going there to meet an old girlfriend from college, and she was just going to hang out there. But she wanted to make sure that she was going to secure the deal first before she would just call him and tell him the truth about how she kind of told a little fib about why she was in California once the deal was successful. But she's there, and then Mr. Stewart, he comes out and he greets her, and he escorts her into his office. And when they got back there, he offered her a chair and he said, well, how was your flight to LA? And she says, fine. And then he asked her about her hotel accommodation, and she says, excellent. And she said, well, I didn't expect him to take care of her flight as well as lodging. And he said, well, of course we took care of them. After all, we sent for you to come to California, didn't we? And she says, yeah, you did. And so he says, well, the proposal is ready. I'll cover the details with you before you leave my office. And she says, it's ready, but I haven't given you all the information you'll need to make a sound decision. And then he kind of he waves it off. And he said, oh, there's no need. Sterling was quite taken with the history and background investigation that was done. She was like, you did an investigation? He was like, of course. He was like, under the circumstances, such measures had to be taken. This is very important, Sterling. And she was stunned because it was a known fact that on numerous occasions, Sterling Hamilton, he refused to endorse or have his name linked to just any product. So she started thinking in her mind, like, why was this endorsement very important to him? And she was wondering why he suddenly had a change of heart about doing them. And she was like, well, for whatever his reasons is, I'm just going to accept it. And I'm just grateful that he agreed to meet with me, and this could ultimately benefit her brother's company. So she's wonderful. She's great. And so Mr. Stewart says, well, after our meeting, I'll give you a copy of the proposal and how she should understand that due to the nature of this matter, she's not to disclose the business arrangement between her and Sterling with anyone. And he also said that stipulation is going to be included in the proposal and it will be outlined in the final contract. And then she says, well, what about my brother? I'm sure you'll want to meet him. And Mr. Stewart, he looks at her puzzled and he says, I don't understand. Why would we? And before she could answer, in walks Sterling. And when he comes in, instantly it was an intensifying shared moments of looks. And he's just looking at her. And the first thing that popped in his mind was like, wow, she's really, really, really beautiful. And so he just says to her, Colby Wingate, how are you? And she says, I'm fine, Mr. Hamilton, thank you. And he says, no, please call me Sterling. And so he goes and he's just still staring at her and she's staring at him. And so Mr. Stewart interrupts and he says, well, I'll leave you two alone for a while, and any questions you have, I'm sure Miss Sterling can answer them for you. And so Sterling and Kobe, they are left alone, and things begin to get quiet because he was just staring at her. And the reason why he was staring at her is because he was like, wow, she really looks so beautiful. And he couldn't believe how she had his full attention and how out of all the beautiful women he's been around, he couldn't understand why none of them could hold his attention the way that she was holding his. So, when you have a fine brother just staring at you like this, he was looking at her with such intensity that it was like it was piercing through her soul or something. So she began to get a little nervous and she was a little intimidated by his stares because, for one, this is her first time seeing this big movie star in person. He's fine and he's just staring at her like this. She gets a little nervous, but she decides to break the silence. And she says, Mr. Stewart indicated that you would cover the details of the contract. And she said, I just can't believe how fast and swiftly things are moving along because I just contacted him like 3 weeks ago. But I'm glad he decided to call me back and do this and set up this meeting between us. And he replies and he says, really? And he was like, well, it has been on my mind for quite some while, and I decided that the time was right. And she was just listening to him talk. And as this Negro was talking, oh my gosh, she loved the sound of his voice and how deep and husky it was. And she was like, oh my gosh, not only did this Negro look good, but he sounds so good. But she regained her focus and she said, well, I'm glad you think so. I believe everything will work out fine for us. And he started stroking his beard and his chin while he was looking at her carefully, and he started smiling. And he says, I'm sure it will. I don't foresee any problems, Kobe, do you? And she says, none. None whatsoever. In fact, a name has already been chosen. And Sterling, he says, there's no need for that, Kobe. I already have a name picked out. Now, Kobe was the one that had the surprised look on her face because she says, you do? And Sterling nods and she says, well, I guess it's negotiable. Then he looked at her like she was crazy. And he says, there's nothing to negotiate. Now she was taken aback because the way he said it in like this curt tone of voice. And then she said, I think JC may have something to say about that. And he was like, JC? She was like, yes, James Cameron Wingate, my brother. He was like, your brother? He was like, what does your brother have to do with any of this? This is strictly a business venture between the two of us. And Kobe just shook her head and she gazed up at him, this man towering over her. And as she was getting to her feet, because she wanted to look at this Negro in his eyes, just squarely in his eyes, okay? Because she was like, no, it's not. And she was like, okay, I know this nigga got a lot of power in Hollywood. But if he thought for 1 second that he was going to run shotgun over her brother's business line or cosmetic business, he had another thing coming. She was not the one. She was not going to let him do that. She don't care who he is. When it comes to her brother and his business, she refused to just lay down and be this little lapdog and shy person. So she was like, I'm sorry if you were given the impression I'm alone in this, Sterling, but James has a lot to say about what happens. After all, it will be his creation, not yours. So, of course, he was like, his creation. How do you figure that? He was like, look, I don't know what kind of sick game you're playing, but, and before he could finish what he was going to say, Mr. Stewart he came in and he said, how are things going? And so Sterling and Kobe turned around and they had this furious look and glare on their faces. And so Edward Stewart, his smile faded when he saw their angry looks, and he says, have we encountered a problem? And Sterling says, that's not the tip of it. She's trying to bring her brother into this. The contract is supposed to be between the two of us, no one else. So Mr. Stewart, he wanted to make sense as to what was going on because obviously there was some confusion and he wanted to get to the bottom of it. So he said, Miss Wingate, why exactly are you here? And she was like, the nerve of you to ask me why I'm here. You're the one who sent for me. You're the one who called me a few days ago to tell me to come here to meet with you for an endorsement deal for my brother's company, Wingate Cosmetics, to endorse this new cologne line he made for men called Awesome. And Sterling was like, oh, so you're not here for the ad? And she was like, what ad? What are you talking about? And he was like, oh my gosh, okay, so, wow. So out of all of the women, all of the responses I got, somehow this strange mistake has happened that your name came up as part of the women who I got a response from the ad. And in all actuality, you hadn't even responded to the ad at all. And out of all the women, you were the one that I chose. You were the one that I was interested in the most. And she was like, what ad are you talking about? Interested for what? What exactly am I chosen for? And so the room got quiet and she was like, are you too deaf? I asked you a question. What have I been chosen for? For what? And he said, well, I put an ad in, of course, anonymously around selected cities. And are you trying to say that you didn't put in a request for the ad? She was like, what ad? I don't know what you're talking about. What is this for? What am I selected for? You chose me for what? Why aren't you answering my question? And he said, this is funny. This is funny, but I chose you to have my baby. And she was like, no. I asked you a legitimate question and I want a legitimate answer. There's no way you can get me to believe that I come all the way from Virginia because I'm actually here because you think that I'm here to be your baby mom because you're looking for a baby mother. Like, what? Like, you guys are joking, right? Right? And when she noticed that they didn't have smiles on their faces and that they had this serious look, and she was like, well, you're serious? And he was like, yeah, I got responses. So yeah. She was like, what? Who in their right mind would do something like this? Is this even legal? And then Edward Stewart, he was like, yeah, as long as the two parties involved, they agreed, then yeah, it's legal. And she was like, what woman in her right mind would actually go along with something like this? Who would do anything like this? And he was like, apparently quite a few, because actually 100 women responded. And besides, people will do anything for $1 million. And she was like, $1 million? He was like, yes, and $500,000 after this deal is completed as a bonus, extra bonus. And she was like, I just can't believe that women will actually do this. Like, I'm not buying this. Did you guys explain to these women what they are actually doing? And they was like, yeah. And she was like, oh, okay, so what about marriage? What about doing things the right way? Like, I don't know, what was I thinking? Falling in love possibly, then having kids? He was like, look, this is strictly like a business deal between me and this woman. And she would have to agree to these stipulations. Now, part of the stipulations is we are going to get married, and then we're going to go through with the pregnancy. She has the baby, and then after 6 weeks, she is to cut all ties with me and the baby and go her merry way and take the money. Now, you see how history is trying to repeat itself. Now, remember, in his own life, his mother left him when he was only 6 weeks old. So you see how this is a vicious cycle. He figured, like, okay, that happened to me at 6 weeks old. Now I'm just going to repeat the cycle. And at 6 weeks old, I'm going to do the same thing. And I can raise my child just like my father raised me. So you see how this is all tying in. And it's crazy how when something happens to us in our past, we kind of like relive that, or we let it dictate how we will react or how we behave in certain situations. So you see the correlation? See how that ties in? And so when he said, after 6 weeks, she can go her merry way, take the money, and I'm sure that will be all she needs. And I'm sure she'll be glad to get that. That's an easy compensation for her. And she thought that was very callous. And she was just thinking in her mind, there is no way that this Negro could have this idea in his mind without something happening in his life, because it wasn't making any sense. And she was like, have you ever thought that maybe the child mother wanted to be involved or something like that? And he was like, no. And so she put two and two together. She was like, well, just because you didn't have your mother, is obvious you didn't have your mother around, doesn't mean that child don't need a baby or don't need a mother. And so he was like, look, this is a business deal, and if I find a woman that agrees with it, I'm sure she'll be happy, like I said. And she said, well, I tell you what, we've already wasted each other's time. Now, if you gentlemen will excuse me, I'm going to leave. But good luck on your callous endeavors and repulsive endeavors. And she turns around and leaves. So she goes back to the hotel because she figured, like, well, shoot, considering the jacked up day that I have, I'm not going back to Virginia. I'm just going to stay here and use up these accommodations for this hotel. Now, the hotel he placed her in, where he set up all these accommodations for her, is the Beverly Hills Hotel. And of course, this is where a lot of the celebrity and movie stars frequented a lot at this hotel. And actually, she was kind of starstruck when she went to the elevator, and on her way up, she saw Nicolas Cage. And so she was a little shocked by this, because she was like, this is a lot different from my place at home, because the salary of a third grade teacher is not, it can't afford anything like that. So she's just so taken aback by this beautiful, elegant, decked out room. Like, the carpet floors felt like mink, and the furniture was like decorated in this Victorian velvet on the sofas and chairs, and these marble countertops, and a big old bedroom, and these warm colors the room was decorated in. And she was just enjoying all of that. She was just eating it up. So she decides, I'm going to soak in a bathtub. And when she went to the bathtub, she poured the bath oil and the bubbles that was created for her on her 21st birthday by her brother James. And that too is called Kobe. So she's just lathering in the bubbles, and she was thinking about how it sucks that she didn't accomplish what she set out to accomplish while being there in California. And she was so glad that she hadn't told her brother the truth as to why she was there. And it's a good thing that she kind of told a fib and told her brother that she was there to visit an old girlfriend from college. So she was glad, because had she jumped the gun, everything would have been ruined. So she was just sitting there and in the bubble bath and just soaking and lathering all the stuff up on her, the bubbles and stuff. And she was just thinking about how blessed she was to have James as a brother and a father, kind of like, because he took on a responsibility, and she just wanted to help his company. She just wanted to do everything she could to kind of make up for the life that he invested into making sure that she was taken care of. So that's the least she could do, is like try to help him out or give him more than what he already has, because she feels like he's entitled to have just everything good that can come to him. And if she can play a part in that, why not? So she was just smiling and relaxing. And then as she's enjoying her bath, she hears this voice that says, you might want to get out of that tub because your toes are starting to shrivel. And of course, she recognizes the voice, but she had to open her eyes, and she looks and she see it was Sterling. And she was like, what you doing up in here? You just can't come up in here like that. What are you doing? Who do you think you are? And he's really tickled by this woman, even though she be going off on him and just telling him off. He's amused by her, because it's a change, because he's used to women eating out of the palm of his hands and kissing his behind because of who he is. And it's been a long time. I mean, well, he can't actually recall a time when any woman, kind of put him in his place and kind of tells him off and act like he's nobody. So he's getting a kick out of this, even with her being, rude. And he said, well, since I'm footing the bill, I have every right to come in here, and I'm here because I think we need to talk. And she was like, well, actually, we don't have anything to talk about. So I don't know what you think you're doing, but you just can't do that. And he was like, look, I'm expecting you to be out of this bathtub very quickly. And I'm going to turn around and I'm going to leave, and I expect for you to come out and see what I want to talk about. Okay? And she was just looking at him like he was crazy. Like, no, this Negro did not come in here. She was like, I don't care who he is or who he think he is. I don't care if he is footing the bill. He's not going to come up in here talking to me like that, towering over me like that. If he thought that he was going to use his height to intimidate her, he had another thing coming. And she was like, shoot. But she said, I'm going to hop out of this tub, though, because I want to see what this Negro want. She was like, let me stop tripping. So she gets out of the tub. And so she starts putting her clothes on to be more presentable. And she's smiling in the mirror because she's thinking about Cynthia and how much she would give her right arm to be in her position right now, being with Sterling, because, she loves Sterling Hamilton. This girl, she is just a diehard fan. So she was just tickled by that she was in a position that she knows Cynthia, if she could, would be in that position. So she finished her final touches on her face or whatever. And then she comes out, and Sterling is just sitting there looking through a magazine. And when she comes out, she noticed how his appearance and how good he's looking. He's looking really, really good. And he looks a lot taller than what he appeared earlier. She was just looking at him. She was like, okay, well, I've never been intimidated by tall men anyway. So she said that didn't intimidate her. So if he thought that he was going to use that to intimidate her, he had another thing coming. Then she also started thinking about women and men like him in Hollywood were used to models and thin pencil skinny women who were a size 0 or maybe size 5, and she was a size 10, and she was very comfortable and completely confident in her own skin, and she was satisfied with her size 10, so that didn't faze her one bit. And so he looks up and he sees her and he started noticing her. He was like, wow. He started really looking at her body, and he was just so mesmerized by her voluptuous, sexy body, her full round hips, her big old booty, her big full breasts, her juicy lips. And he was just looking at her because she was different from what he's used to. He's used to model skinny types, but he was mesmerizing. He found her body figure enticing. It was very feminine to him, and he was thinking how any man would turn their heads at how good she looked. And he was saying, okay, she's about 5'4". He was just really looking at her, and she was looking at him, and she was trying to figure out, what is he staring at? Why is he staring at her like that? But she just puts her hands on her hip and say, what do you have to talk to me about? And he just came over there by her, and he was like, I think we need to just recap on what we talked about earlier. And she was like, oh my gosh, you still on that. You need to realize that you don't always get what you want. The answer is still the same. No. And he was like, but usually I always get what I want. And she was like, well, usually is not always. And he was like, okay, that's true. So let me rephrase what I said, since I don't need any other misunderstandings to happen. He said, I always get what I want. And I want you, Kobe Wingate, to have my baby. And when he says this, she's just looking up at him, and she gets a little turned on because, for one, he's fine. For two, she loves his voice. For three, he's forward, and that kind of like turned her on, and she was puzzled as to why her body was reacting to his touch and his words and the way he was looking at her. And so she was like, no. And so she was like, as a matter of fact, you need to leave, because she was thinking like, this Negro, he can have any woman he wants, and he plays these games with these women, and she was not finna be the one. She was not going to be an added woman to his list. So she was like, you need to just leave, because he was way out of her league. At least she thought he was way out of her league. So she goes to the door and she was like, you need to leave. And he was like, well, if you really care about your brother like you say you do, you'll let me stay. And she was like, what are you talking about? And he was like, well, if you give me 5 minutes of your time, I'll be more than glad to tell you. And so she was like, okay, well, you need to hurry up, because now you got 4 minutes. So off you go. And he didn't want to like her, but he really liked her, because this once again was refreshing that here it is, a woman was telling him about himself, and he liked her. He couldn't help it. So she was like, okay, I'm listening. And he said, well, apparently I found some rather interesting news about your brother and his company. And she was like, such as? And he was like, from my resources, which Jacob Madras knows a lot of things about what goes on in the industries and things as such. And to my understanding, your brother has kind of like some enemies out there. And she was like, what do you mean? He said, well, correct me if I'm wrong, but your brother was working for a very prestigious company, and they're looking to get revenge because he failed to divulge his ingredients. And she was like, yeah, that's true. He did get fired, but he told his superiors that he made the special fragrance and cologne for me. It's for me. It's called Kobe. And he was like, okay, well, that may be true, but they didn't appreciate that. Your brother didn't leave the company on the best of terms. So now they're looking to get revenge. And actually, I think that this business is trying to play dirty because they made calculated moves. They waited till your brother ventured off into his own. His company is doing well, it's very lucrative business, and now they're deciding to come in for the kill and take over his company because they're trying to get back at him for what they did. You have to understand, your brother left on bad terms. He was their top chemist, and I'm sure a lot of the sales went down when he left because he was one of the top ones that made all these interesting fragrances. So now they're looking to just take over everything. And she was like, "Oh my gosh, like this cannot be true. Are you sure?" He was like, "Yeah, I'm very, very positively sure. They're looking to do this, and they're looking to do this very quickly." And she was like, "Oh my gosh, I cannot let this happen because my brother James worked so hard, and he took every dime he had, his blood, sweat, tears, his life, his savings into this company to make it be as successful as it is today. Like, who do they think they are to think that they could just come in and take over my brother's company, something he's worked so hard for? Can they even do that?" He was like, "Yeah, according to his resources, they can. If a business is doing well, which your brother, his profit sells, he should be very proud of himself, of how much he's accomplished. But according to his sales, they can do that. The stock exchange, if they see a company doing well, they can come right in and do that if they wanted to." And she was like, "Oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm going to do." And Sterling was watching her, and he could see that she was very, very sad, and she looked very defeated. And she was like, I just don't know what I'm going to do. Like this, I can't let this happen to my brother. His wife is pregnant, and this will be a horrible time for them to try to take over my brother's company, all because of revenge, because this is personal. It's business as well as personal. Like, how evil can you get? That's very disrespectful, and I can't let that company do that. I can't let Morton Industries, a company my brother used to work for, try to seek revenge because he didn't leave on the best of terms. And he's like, "There's nothing you can do to stop them. I mean, because the ball is already set in motion and they're looking to do this rather quickly." And she was like, "Well, I don't know what to do. I'm drawing blanks. I can't think of what I can do to help him. So I'm just going to tell my brother what's going on." And he was like, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. And he didn't know what to say because the poor girl, she just looked so defeated and sad, and it bothered him. He didn't want to see her crying and being sad and stressed over her brother's business. So he just comes up with an idea. I mean, he figured like, okay, her brother's company might be in trouble. I want to have a baby. So I'm going to make a proposition. So he goes over and hugs her, and he said, "It's okay, it's okay." He was like, "I'll tell you what, maybe you can help your brother." And she was like, "How?" And he was like, look, Kobe, if you have my baby, I'll make sure that whatever endorsements your brother need, I'll back it. And whatever financial funding he needs, I'll foot the funding as well. And she was like, "You just don't get it, Sterling. You just don't get it. You're still on that." He was like, "Yeah, I want you to have my baby." And she was like, but Sterling, you have to understand, I am an elementary school teacher. That means I love kids very much. And there's no way that I could possibly carry a baby for 9 months. And then after that, just act like I never had a baby at all. Like, I can't do that. Not to my own flesh and blood. You're asking for something unreasonable. And he said, well, I mean, my goodness, I know this is tough to think about, but I need you to think about it. And I need you to make a decision. And I need you to make a decision tomorrow over breakfast the next morning. Just think about it. And she was like, my brother, he did so much. He did so much for me. And he was like, yeah, your brother did so much for you. And you were just saying how much you're proud of him and how he's done everything for you. But what have you done for him? What are you willing to sacrifice for him? And that got her, because he did give up his life practically so she could have one. So she was like, okay, just leave me alone. Like, just leave. Like, how can I reach you so we can meet tomorrow? Just let me think about this. This is hard to swallow. And he was like, there's no need. He said, you see those doors over there? We have a connecting suite. She was like, oh gosh. And he was like, I thought you knew that. She was like, no, I didn't. He was like, yeah, so I'm right there. And if you need anything, just knock on the door. And she was like, whatever, just bye. She was like, no, you know what? No, I have a few things to say. You have this reputation of being this player, this bad boy, and linked to all these different women, and how you have lots of women to choose from, and all this and that. You're used to a certain type of woman. So I'm just curious as to why I was chosen. Why did you choose me to have your baby? You can pick plenty of the women that you were dating and seeing in these tabloids or that's in the media that you're linked to. So why did you choose me? And he says, well, I found the information of you very interesting. He said, foremost were the facts that according to your medical record and the information I gathered or garnered and I obtained, I don't have to worry about you giving me anything other than a baby. And then I also saw that you don't have any genealogical problems, so there shouldn't be any difficulty with you getting pregnant. And also, you're not romantically linked to anyone. I didn't see anything about that. And, at this point, she was like, the nerve. She didn't appreciate that he invaded her privacy by obtaining information about her. And then she was like, you know what? Maybe you shouldn't be, of course, you shouldn't be concerned about me. Maybe I should definitely be concerned about you and what you might give me. You're the one that has this global sex life with all these women. And what if it's a problem with you? What makes you so sure that you can get someone pregnant? He was still amused by her, even though she always tells him off. He was like, man, those tabloids, they just like to sell those sleazy stories to the papers. And the media eats it up. They love a good story just to keep their ears buzzing. That's all. And he was like, I know you're too intelligent for me to stand here and deny every intimate detail you've ever heard about me. So I won't even try to explain that to you. But I will tell you, most of what you read is not true. And although I do date a number of women, I don't believe in taking unnecessary risks. I love my life too much not to be selective and cautious. It's just plain suicidal these days. You can risk yourself of getting all types of stuff. So to answer your question, it won't be a problem. So I will address your concerns about you thinking I'm going to give you something, but to relieve you of your little concerns, I recently had a physical, and I don't have anything that would cause you to be concerned, and my sperm count is more than adequate to accomplish what I need to do. And so at this point, she feels a little bit embarrassed and like mortified. And so she just started blushing, and she was like, not only that, what about Diamond Swain? Aren't you two romantically linked? Like, aren't you in a relationship? What about her? Why can't she give you a baby? You know? And he just said, Diamond Swain is a very special friend and she's special to me, but not in the way that the media claimed. We're very good friends and that's all you need to know. And she was like, no, that's not all I need to know. If you plan on sleeping with the both of us, then he was like, wait, pause. He said, I wouldn't do that. And I refuse to discuss Diamond any further. So she was just looking at him because she had to calm down because she had to think. She had to think here. He was, giving her a proposition that she might accept. So she had to bring it on back, tone it on down. And she was like, why did you choose me? I just don't understand. And then he just says, I chose you to carry my baby. Well, for reason number one, you're extraordinarily bright. And I do understand that you graduated from high school at the age of 16. And she was like, but I took extra classes. I put in enough hours to waive my senior year of high school. So that allowed me to graduate. So I don't need no accolade or no award for that. I just, I did extra things to graduate early. That's all. And he said, well, you also completed 4 years of college in 3 years and still managed to graduate valedictorian of your class. And also, you got your master's degree in half the usual time. She was like, well, so what? I merely took classes year round and studied hard. And he was like, as she was saying this, he was like, okay, that's kind of refreshing and different because he's used to women, tooting their own horn, but she was rather humble. He was like, wow, that's admiring. And then he said, well, also, according to my information, you're not seriously involved with anyone and haven't been for quite some time. So all those things are important to me. So to answer your question, that's why I chose you. And if you decide to go along with what I proposed to you, you must agree that no one can know about our agreement. And he said the only person who will know about our marriage is just you, me, Edward, and God. That's it. You're not to tell nobody, not even your brother. And we have to do everything within our power to convince everyone that we're in love. And she says, but from what I read, you never really cared about what anyone think in the media. So why all of a sudden do you care about what the media thinks? And besides, my brother, he knows me too well. He'll never believe it. He knows I'm not serious about anyone, especially not serious enough to rush into marriage. He was like, well, I mean, I really don't care about the media or whatnot, but my child, because of the circumstances, I don't want my child thinking that there was some issues or situations surrounding his birth or whatever. I don't need him to be thinking anything or tying any speculations about how he was conceived. And he was like, well, and as far as your brother is concerned, it'll be up to you to convince him of our marriage. Okay, you can tell him. Since he knows you so well, okay, I'll be a little bit lenient. But you got to convince him that we're a match made in heaven and that we're really, really, really in love. She was like, oh my gosh, things are moving way too fast. Oh my goodness, I have to process all of this. Oh gosh, he's like, I wish I could tell you to take your time and take all the time you need, but I need your decision as soon as possible. Like I said, I need it early in the morning over breakfast. So she was like, okay, okay, all right. So let me think about this. And so he leaves and he said, well, I'll see you in the morning. So she's just really, she's in tears because, well, not so much because he was showing her that he was going to be a little bit lenient, a little bit. So she didn't feel too bad, but she just felt bad that she has to lie to her brother. She has to carry this baby. She has to make people believe that they're in love. It's just a whole lot for her to process. So it's the next morning and she gets up extra early. And as she was getting ready, she hears a knock on her door. And she was hoping that it wasn't Sterling because she wasn't ready to talk to him or face him just yet. So she says yes. And then she hears Miss Wingate. It's Edward Stewart. So she was like, what? So she looked out the window, the peephole or whatnot. And she was relieved that it wasn't Sterling. And she was like, Mr. Stewart, this is a pleasant surprise. I hadn't expected to. And he interrupted her and he said, ever see me again? He said, I can understand your surprise, but it's no greater than my own. Sterling actually had an unexpected appointment this morning, and he called and asked me to be your escort to breakfast. And she says, escort to breakfast? And he was like, yeah. And he kind of grinned back at her, and he says, yes, and it appears I'm just in time, and looks like you were about to leave. And she was like, but I really don't need an escort. And I don't know why Mr. Hamilton would think I would. He says, neither do I, but let's just humor him, shall we? And she frowns and she said, I'm not in no mood to humor Sterling Hamilton. The man is despicable. And he started laughing because he hadn't heard nobody say that about him. And she was like, did I say something funny? And he was like, I apologize for my outburst, Miss Wingate, but you're unlike the women who are usually around Sterling. I find your candidness refreshing. And he said, my dear, you must join me for breakfast. If you don't do it to humor Sterling, then do it to humor me. I love your company. And she said, well, in that case, let's go. So they were sitting down and he said, well, after you left my office yesterday, it took me a good 20 minutes to calm Sterling down. And she was like, why? Was he that mad? And she was getting a kick out of it that she was getting under his skin, possibly. He was like, no, he wasn't mad. He just couldn't contain himself from laughing so hard. She was like, laughing? What did he find funny? What was so amusing? He said, the fact that you walked out on him. No woman has ever done that. And she says, well, it's about time someone did. He has a lot of nerve asking me to do what he wants me to do. And he said, yeah, he's pretty determined. He's a pretty determined person. And she said, I know, that's the sad part. And then he gets quiet and he says, Sterling has his reasons for taking the approach he's taking. She said, I can believe that. The man is cold, calculating, arrogant, egotistical, just a conceited person who will stop at nothing to get what he wants. Any decent man wouldn't use what's happening to my brother's company as a bargaining tool to force me into doing something I really don't want to do or something that I'm against. He said, I know Sterling did make a good impression on you, but believe it or not, he's none of those things you just described him to be. In all actuality, Sterling is the most decent man I know. And she said, then you must not know too many people. He just chuckles. He said, on the contrary, I know a great number of people. And like I said, Sterling is the most decent person I know. He's a warm hearted individual and a loving man who would make a wonderful father. Actually, his own father, Chandler Hamilton, was that kind of man. He smiled. You know, the media wasn't all over the relationship between Tiger Woods and his father, but even their close relationship can't hold a light to the one Sterling and Chandler had. She said, had? He's like, yes, Chandler passed away unexpectedly last year. He died in his sleep from a heart attack. And she was like, well, did you know him personally? He says, oh, yes, he was my friend. We went all the way to back when we were kids. The two of us, we grew up in a small lumberjack town in the mountains of North Carolina. She was like, okay, well, did you know Sterling's mother as well? And he took a sip of his coffee, and after a long, weary sigh, he said yes. So she decided to pass for answers to question, what that sigh and that long pause, what was that? So she was like, I understand she wasn't around while he was growing up. And so Edward Stewart kind of raised his eyebrows and he says, so Sterling told you that or what? She was like, no, but it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure it out. I get this feeling that as far as he's concerned, the whole idea of motherhood sucks. And she was just looking at him, and she could tell that Mr. Stewart was desperately struggling not to say something, but the waiter came back to take their order. But after the waiter left, she decided to pick up where they left off. And she was like, there were some things she needed to know about Sterling's childhood, things she needed to understand. So she says, Mr. Stewart? And he says, yes. She says, I know as Sterling's attorney, you're very loyal to him, and I can appreciate that. But I want you to try to understand my predicament. I have some important decisions to make. There are decisions that could very well affect the life of a child here. Sterling expects me to give him my decision today. And even now, I'm still totally against what he wants me to do, but I'm also torn by the thought that my brother might lose his company without Sterling's help. But when you think about it, me being the one chosen for what Sterling wants to do doesn't make any sense. Sterling claims he did a thorough investigation on me. In that case, I would have been the last person he would have chosen. I love kids. I was named Teacher of the Year in my hometown last year. And I'm on various committees that benefit children. Someone who loves kids as much as I do wouldn't easily give up one. He should have thought, or at least considered that when he was doing all this research on me. He really should have sought out a woman who doesn't like kids or who's indifferent to them. Just think about this for a minute. If a builder wanted to tear down an old building, he wouldn't employ the services of a person who's a member of the historical society, would he? And Mr. Stewart, he looked at her long and hard before answering, and he says, you're right. No, he wouldn't. And to his way of thinking, she was absolutely right. Actually, he had wondered the same thing himself. Then he began reflecting on the look of Sterling's face when viewing the videotape of Colby for the first time that had been a part of the investigation. And he was recalling a scene that he was capturing of Colby. And when his eyes lit up in this one particular scene, when she was outside on the playground playing with the kids, and the look on her face indicated that she enjoyed the children and she enjoyed playing the little children's games as much as they were enjoying it. So Inwardly, Edward, when he was thinking about how he was looking at her interact with those kids, Kobe, on that videotape when they was investigating her, he believed that Sterling wasn't just seeking a woman to bear his child. He was subconsciously looking for a woman who was the epitome of a perfect mother, something his own mother was not. So he began to look at Miss Wingate. So she's back at the room, and Sterling, of course, is there, and he apologized for not joining her for breakfast. And how did things go with Mr. Edwards? She said, fine. And so he said, well, I need to hear the verdict. What's the verdict? And she said, well, I will agree to go ahead and follow through with this plan that you have. But there's a few things that I want you to modify within the contract, please. And he says, okay, well, what is it? And she said, well, first of all, I know with it, I read over the stipulation and all of the requirements and agreement and everything that entails this contract here or proposal. But would you please allow me to have a little bit more time with the baby? I know you saying that at 6 weeks old, you know, for me to cut ties, I can't agree with that. So can you modify that? Can you make it for a year? He said, a year? And she says, yes, because first of all, who's going to breastfeed the baby? I believe in breastfeeding because it makes the baby more healthier. And he got to thinking about that. He had never thought about that before. And he was like, okay. And she says, not only that, who's going to babysit the baby? Who's going to look after the baby, take care of the baby? What greater person than I? You know, I need time to bond with this baby. And I'm sure you won't entrust a newborn baby with somebody that's not the mother. And he was like, okay, I never thought about that. That's true. A child does, obviously, she's bringing up some good points here. A child does need the mother's breast milk, and a child does need to bond with the mother, obviously, from what she's saying. And she was like, I just give me time. Will you at least agree to that? And he was like, well, okay. Okay, it'll be for a year. And then after that, you know, that's plenty of time to have bond with the baby and the baby, you know, surviving off of your breast milk or you're breastfeeding it or whatever. So I'll agree to that. And she said, well, in that case, let's do it. And he says, okay, well, you might want to tell your brother this news because we're engaged now. Here's the ring. You're going to have to wear the ring, and the media is getting ready to eat this up, and it's going to be everywhere. So I suggest you go ahead and break the news to your brother and his wife so that they won't find out on TV, because it's going to be everywhere once they see this ring on your finger. And so he pulls out the ring, and it's so beautiful, and it's just gorgeous, and she really loves kids. This is what she always wanted, you know? And she also said, and another thing you have to know is that there will be no sex before marriage. He was like, excuse me? She was like, yeah, I mean, there will be no sex before marriage. I've never had sex before. And I saved myself because I really do honor marriage and falling in love and things like that. And if we're going to have sex, it's going to be after we get married. He was kind of taken aback, like, wow, you've never had sex? Like, how did you avoid all those guys in junior high and high school and college? And she was like, I had a very amazing brother who taught me well. So I was able to avoid all those pickup lines and lies and sweet nothings that they would want to whisper in women's ear. My brother trained me very well. So he was impressed by that too. So he was like, okay, that's fine as well. And so he was like, so yeah, go ahead and tell your brother before the media gets a hold of to it and they find out that way. And so of course she calls her brother and she was like, hey, and he was like, yeah, hey, sweetheart, like, how are you doing? How are things in California? And she said, it's good. She was like, I got a little confession to make. And he was like, what? She was like, remember how I had said that I was coming out here to see a girlfriend from college? And he was like, yeah. She was like, well, actually, I came here because I just got engaged. And he was like, what? Like, engaged? Like, you didn't even tell me you were seeing anyone. And she was like, I know. We wanted to keep it a secret because of who it is. And he was like, well, who is it? And she was like, Sterling Hamilton. He was like, oh my gosh, Sterling Hamilton, the movie star. She was like, yes, but you cannot tell anyone. Just please, just keep quiet about it. He was like, that's impossible. That's going to be everywhere. And do you know about Sterling's reputation with all these women out here? She was like, I know, but I know what I'm doing. You raised me well. He's really a great guy, and we're head over heels in love with each other. And I just want your approval. Like, we really love each other. I know I was wrong for not telling you, but we really want to do this. This is something that we want. And you'll get a chance to meet him. We'll come meet you, and you can be the judge for yourself. He was like, all right, I'm going to trust your judgment. I do trust that you know how to make sound, wise decisions. And of course, Cynthia, she's in the background screaming. She was like, oh my gosh, she's marrying Sterling Hamilton. Like, get out of here. So she can't contain herself. And she's excited about meeting this man that she has had a crush on all of her life almost. And so, of course, she's in total support of it. So she hangs up, and then it zooms to Sterling and how he starts talking to himself and reminding himself that, okay, I selected Kobe, and this is going to be strictly business, and I'm not going to fall in love. I'm not going to need her. And the reason why he kept trying to tell himself this is because he didn't want to end up like his father, loving a woman so deeply, even unto death, like his father. He don't want to be like that. So, but he could feel himself slipping. That he could feel himself, because even though this is supposed to be this act in front of the cameras and things like that, he actually likes this woman. He finds her to be so amazing. And so they are engaged, and they put on a show, and the media is eating it up. They're taking all types of pictures, and they have to perform for the cameras, and they're kissing and things like that. But the more that they're pretending, the more that feelings are getting involved, the more that his walls are coming down, the more that he don't really care about letting himself go around her. And it was really beautiful how he was slowly unfolding and slowly, putting his trust and his love into her. He realized, like, the more that they spent time together, that he actually needed her. He needed someone like her to show him, another side of life, of what it's like to receive love from a woman versus his father. So he don't know anything about love and acceptance from a woman. So he don't want to give in. He don't want to give in, and he's just really trying to just keep his feelings intact. So this one day, his friend and business partner came by his house to discuss business with him. And the reason why he was there was because he didn't understand why he didn't want to partner with Nicholas Chenault of Chenault Electronics. And of course, we all know Nicholas Chenault is his half brother. So he has to explain to his business partner why he don't want to do business with Nicholas, his half brother, because he has something against his mother. And of course, his business partner really don't know the details behind his mother and all of that. I mean, he knows a little bit, but he didn't know it in full detail, the way that his mother kind of like disowned him. And he breaks down and tells his business partner then understands why, okay, he gets it now, why he don't want a partnership with his half brother's company. And so as he was telling his business partner the story, Kobe actually overhears it. She overhears it because she was getting ready to go out on the beach and just, not the beach, the ocean, look at the view of the ocean at his house because he has a really nice ocean in the back of his property. And she just overheard them talking, and she discovered his background. She didn't know his background. She didn't know that it was that severe with his mother. And she could hear the hurt and pain in his voice. And he even had tears in his eyes when he was telling his business partner this. So then she was so hurt, and she finally felt bad for all the things that she described him, because she said he was a pig, he was a chauvinist, he was despicable, and all these things. And now she realizes his reasonings behind why he is the way that he is. And that began to do something to her heart. It warmed her heart, and it made her want to fight to stay in his life, fight to let him realize that he needs her and that she loves him and that she won't turn her back on him, so that she can not only have her child but gain his heart too. And so she decided, after she had heard enough, she tiptoed out and went back up to her room. And of course, after that was over, his business partner leaves, and then Sterling goes out by the ocean or whatever. But it just so happened, no, Kobe then goes out near the ocean or whatnot. And when Sterling friends, his business partner, leave, he goes out there and he sees Kobe out there, and he kind of startled her, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, you scared me." And he was like, what are you doing? And she was like, nothing. She was like, well, what's wrong? And he was like, I heard you. No, he said, I know you were listening to the conversation between me and my business partner. And she was like, well, how did you know that? Because I mean, I made sure that I was quiet. And he kind of liked that she didn't deny it, because she could have denied or just lied and said that, oh, no, I wasn't spying, but she told the truth. So he admired that. So he appreciated that she was being honest when he confronted her and said, you were eavesdropping on the conversation. I know you was listening. She said, well, how did you know? Because I made sure that I tiptoed my way back to my room. And he was like, well, your scent, that scent that your brother created for you, which smells really good, it gave it away. It's so strong. I knew that you were there because I could smell you. And she was like, well, I didn't mean to eavesdrop. I was getting ready to come out here to view the ocean. And then when I heard that, I just felt so bad for you. I mean, not sympathy, but it just was, I didn't know. And of course, he got a little bit angry because he's embarrassed that she knew that his mother had turned her back on him. And you know, it's hard to know that your mother disowned you or rejected you. And he got mad. He was like, you shouldn't have eavesdropped or whatever, just stay out of my business or whatever. And she was like, listen, you ought to be grateful that you even have parents. My parents died in a freaking plane crash. And then I work with students who don't even have mothers. And some of the stories that they told me is nothing compared to yours. Now, you're just blessed enough. You're missing your blessings. You're blessed enough to have at least one loving parent. Have you ever thought about that? Just because this woman walked out on your life doesn't mean that has to be the end all be all. You have to count your blessings. You're not realizing that you had at least one loving parent. And I know technically your mother, she has two sons. And I know she turned her back on you, Sterling, but it's okay. I know it hurts to know that your brother Nicholas, he grew up and was surrounded and received the love that you were denied. I understand that. I understand, but don't let it break you. At least you have parents. Okay, sure. You have a mother who is alive. You had an opportunity to have the love from your father. Okay, he's deceased, but I didn't have a chance to have any opportunity or any bonding moment at all. Not really. 10 years old is when I lost my parents. So just think about that. They're not even here for me to even try to have a relationship with them. And he got to thinking about that. And this feeling just overcame him. And he couldn't control how his heart was melting at her words and how her words gave him so much power. And he just kissed her. And he couldn't help how passionately he was kissing her. He was kissing her so passionately that it was shocking himself, and it was shocking Colby as well, because she let him just take control of her and just kiss her. They almost ended up having sex, but she stops it. But in that moment is where their love kind of like unfolds. You know, she had to stop it because she could foresee it going in the wrong direction, and they were only engaged and they weren't married yet. So she just turns and goes inside, and she was just thinking about that all night. Like, she was like, oh my gosh, like that moment, there's no denying that there is something there. There is definitely something there. So it's time for them to go and meet her brother and Cynthia. But he was done with trying to put up this fight. He was done with it. But he's had a little bit that he was wrestling with. He was a little afraid because he had never felt this way before about any woman. So they go down there. He meets his brother James. They click. They bonded. They had a long conversation. And while Colby and Cynthia were, just catching up or whatever, she was getting to be a little worried because they were back there talking for hours. And then both of them come out, and she was like, well, is everything okay? And they both were like, yeah, we had a long, good talk. That's my man right there. So she was elated and glad that they got along. But he said, well, I want you to stay here with your brother because I have to leave for a week. And I think you need to stay here instead of going back to my home property. I just don't want the paparazzi and the media and all of that to be harassing you and stuff like that. She was like, I can take care of it. I'm a big girl. He was like, no, trust me. Just listen. Please listen to me. And then, of course, her brother James was like, yes, please listen to him. He's going to be busy for a week, and we haven't spent time with you. So this is a good time for us to get a chance to spend time with you before y'all, get married and, of course, go on your honeymoon or whatever. So she was like, okay, but one thing you're going to have to let me go back to work. And he said, okay, you can go back to work, but I'm going to have security with you. And she was like, oh, gosh, okay. So anyway, she's there at her brother's place, and she's staying there for a week or whatever. And she was glad that Sterling had hired security, because when she got to school, the media was out there. They were trying to ask her questions or whatever. So she was grateful that she did have security there. And so during this week, he was missing her already. It had been the second day, and he was just thinking about her, and she was thinking about him, and she was missing him or whatever or whatnot. And so during this week, Sterling's butler, Simon, he entered the room when he was in his study, and he was just going over some notes or whatever. And he was like, you have a visitor here to see you. And he was like, who? Who is it? And he says it's a lady by the name of Angeline Chenault. And he was like, wonder what she wants. This is different. So he was like, tell security to let her in. And so he was beginning to think, like, all of these feelings started resurfacing slightly. He began to think about how devastated and betrayed and rejected he felt by this woman. But then he started to remember the talk that Kobe had with him and how she was instrumental in him counting his blessings, that he had at least one loving parent. So he didn't feel bad. So he was able to regain his strength. So in walks Angeline. And he's looking at her, and she had dark hair, and she had delicate features. She was gorgeous. And he was thinking as he was looking at her, like, wow, she looks great. She don't look like a woman who has a 35-year-old son, or a 30-year-old son for that matter. And he was thinking how the years evidently had been good to her. And so she comes in and she says, hello, Sterling. And he nodded and he said, Mrs. Chenault, this is a surprise. And he says, why are you here? And she was just smiling. She couldn't really, I think she was shocked herself, And he was just frowning because he was thinking, like, she looked way too calm, like it was an everyday occurrence that she paid a child she walked out on 35 years ago. Like this was just something normal. So he was just frowning at her. And he was like, is there something I can do for you, since I'm sure this isn't a social call? And she kind of like sighed apprehensively and well, she was appreciative. And she says, you inherit more from Chandler than just his good looks, Sterling, and I'm glad of that. And you're also upfront and to the point like he was. And you said, my father was a hardworking man, so am I. He didn't believe in playing cat and mouse games, and neither do I. So I'm going to ask you again, is there a reason why you're here? And when he said that, like, the color in her face just began to drain. And she just dropped her head and she closed her eyes before lifting her head and looking back at him and meeting his gaze directly. And she says, I'm here to try to right a wrong. Turning my back on you was the worst thing I could have ever done. And I know that before I leave this earth, I'll pay for how I treated you that day when you approached me in North Carolina. You weren't any older than... Then Sterling, he cuts her off and he says, quite frankly, I don't want to talk about it. And she says, but I have to. I want to apologize for the pain I caused you that day. I actually called you the day after the incident, but Chandler wouldn't let me talk to you. He said if I hurt you again, he would tell Alan about my past. And at the time, I thought I would lose Alan if he found out. So I never contacted you again. I don't want you to hate me any longer. And he started rubbing his head because he could feel the tension headache coming on. But he says, lady, I don't hate you. In fact, I have no feelings for you whatsoever. Now, if that's all you came here to say, then please, I appreciate it if you let yourself out. And I want you to have a great trip back to Florida. And she nodded and she spoke again and said, I also want to congratulate you, Sterling. I read in the papers that you're getting married. I wish you the very best. I sincerely mean that. I hope that you'll be very happy. And as she was talking, tears clouded in her eyes. And she says, look, hopefully one day you'll forgive me for being a 17-year-old girl who thought money was everything and was willing to sacrifice anything to get it, even the love of a good man and my newborn child. I made a mistake, and I know that before I die, I'll have to pay for it. And I'm actually paying for it right now. My doctors informed me a few days ago that I have a blood clot on my brain that's causing the headaches I've been having lately. They don't think there's anything they can do, and surgery may not even be an option at this point. I want to get things right in my life. And more than anything, I want to bring my two sons together. If anything were to happen to me, you'll be the only blood relative Nicholas will have. I plan to tell him everything. I just wanted to let you know that. And whether you choose to believe it or not, I regret not being a part of your life. I realized that many years ago. But then it was too late. The damage had already been done. Actually, I did tell Alan the truth before he died. And he was very understanding and supportive. I was a fool not to have told him sooner. If I had, maybe things would have been different. Like Chandler, Alan was a good man. No matter what you may have thought over the years, I've always been proud of you and all of your accomplishments, Sterling. And I do love you. I just hope and pray that one day you'll believe that. Goodbye. And she turned and she walked away. And those words, it got me. And I was like, ugh. I actually didn't like this woman. But after she stood there and said this, I mean, I kind of felt bad for her in this moment. And Sterling, he was at a loss for words and he didn't know what to say. He didn't say anything. He just watched her walk out of the room. And so it skips to Colby. And she's still at her brother's, and it had been close to 2 weeks, and she hadn't talked to Sterling. But he would call her brother James every day to see how she was doing. And Colby was just sitting there talking to her brother, and she had asked her brother, had Sterling called today? And her brother says yes. And he was like, and he also said he misses you. And so she was like, what? And he was like, what do you mean, what? You sound like that's surprising to hear. She was like, no, I just thought that, he wouldn't tell you. I'm shocked that he didn't want to tell me personally. And so he just shook his head and smiled at her. And at that moment, she realized that maybe he was falling for her. And maybe she had won him over. And just when she was thinking about him, the phone rings. And of course it was Sterling. And she was like, how are you? And he was like, I'm good. But he was saying how he misses her. And he was like, listen, I know we can't have sex before marriage, but how would you feel about us like having some phone sex? Because I want to tell you everything that I want to do to you, just so you can know and understand how I'm feeling right now. And they have this phone sex, and it was so incredible or whatever. And so after they had the phone sex, he's battling some things on the inside of him. Sterling is thinking about a whole lot of things. The fact that he's fallen for Colby, and then he was trying to clear his head with the news that his mother had shared with him, and he felt compassion for her. So he goes for a jog, and he's just trying to clear his head or whatnot. And so after he gets done with his business, it was time for them to get married. And at this point, when they get married, they actually are in love with each other. So the vows were real and the commitment was real at this point. And After they get married, they go off to the Barbados. They were in the Barbados for a week, and it was so gorgeous. I mean, the weather, the scenery, the water, the place where they were at, everything was amazing. And it was in the Barbados where he just, when you become one with someone and you become intimate with them for the first time, it's amazing. Now, this was the first time that Sterling had ever had unprotected sex with any woman, because he always wore protection no matter what. So for him, this was like his first time, because he never had sex nakedly. Like it wasn't never naked. It was covered. It was always covered. And so when they were intimate, he just lost his mind. He just lost all his marbles. The sex was, it wasn't sex. They were making love. And it was so amazing and so intimate, and it made him feel so vulnerable that he just put his heart, soul, trust, and everything, his whole entire being and his whole existence into her. And the love between them was so beautiful. So they spent a week there, and they're just enjoying each other and enjoying the company. And of course, they're trying to get pregnant and things like that. So they're having plenty of sex to do that. And I'm sure that, the pregnancy wasn't going to be a problem because, they're getting it in. So he was just explaining to her that, well, we have this week. And then the following week, I want to take you to North Carolina, my hometown. And she was like, that's great that you said that because, I know you have a lot of properties, Sterling. I know you have one in California. But if it were up to me, I prefer that for our place to live, I want us to live in North Carolina permanently instead of California, because North Carolina was closer to Virginia. It was near her brother and his wife, and she just felt like that was the place where they needed to be. So he agreed, and he said also, I want to tell you that when we get back or whatever from visiting my hometown in North Carolina, I have to return to California because I have to be scheduled to board a plane to go to Spain for a month to work on a movie. And so she's a little sad by this, but you know, she do understand that he is a movie star, so she's supportive of them, of him. And so she was just enjoying the moment though, because Barbados was so breathtaking. And so they get back, and after they visited his hometown in North Carolina and things like that. He received a phone call from his half brother Nicholas that their mother was rushed to the hospital, and the doctors didn't think she had much longer. So he rushes to the hospital, and of course, Kobe was like, "No, just go ahead and go. Just go to the hospital and just see about your mother. You need to be there for her, and you need to bond with Nicholas and give him a chance, because after all, he didn't know that you even existed," and things like that. So he goes to the hospital. He sees Nicholas for the first time, and Nicholas is like, he was just, it was surreal for him because he didn't even know that he had a brother. Here he is, 30 years old, and he didn't even know that he had a 35-year-old brother, and that it was Sterling Hamilton of all people. And he was just saying how he wanted a relationship with him, and that his mother told him everything, and he's sorry how that happened, but he don't know the woman that he knew when he was 6 weeks old or growing up. He didn't have that description of how his mother was. He didn't know her to be that way, so he didn't understand it. But he said, let's just work on it. They do, and he ended up partnering with his half brother, and actually he ended up building a relationship with his mother again. His mother actually survives her emergency hospital stay, and everything is all done. Like it became like one beautiful piece to the puzzle that completed everything. So he got his mother back, he got his brother, and he got the love of his life. And then they ended up having a baby girl. So this was an amazing love story. And I really, really, really enjoyed this book. And I can't wait to see what's going to be in the next book within this series. So thank you guys for listening and watching. God bless. Bye bye.